Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at BTB World with, of course, Farokh Patafi and Raja Faisal in the studios. Our discussion today is going to be focused, one, on what is going on within India, especially in terms of the threat that the freedom of expression is under, and of course the freedom of media is under for quite some time now. We've seen a number of incidents taking place against media agencies, against journalists, and unnecessary raids being conducted in the homes of journalists, unfortunately. And such recent acts have also pointed again towards this concern, which has now put India to 150th in the World Press Freedom Index, which is an annual ranking. And this is important, especially in terms of how the countries are viewed internationally as well. The recent raids against a number of journalists as part of a media agency have also triggered a lot of debate around what is going on. What the Indian government seems to be claiming is an investigation that is necessary and has also been reportedly based previously also in terms of what was cited in another publication regarding this media agency and the way that it's being funded internationally to go ahead with Chinese propaganda. That was something that this agency has also talked about previously, saying that they will be responding to these claims in court. The actions again that have been taken under the label of the investigation being conducted, of course, are being justified to ensure that there is objective, free and fair media. But what seems to be happening is quite the opposite in ways in which such freedom of expression is being curtailed and the rights of journalists being violated. And we're going to try and explore that in further detail in terms of what this specific incident is nuanced about, and then also what it is representative of in terms of what is going on largely in the country. Our next segment is going to be focusing on the very important Apex Committee meeting regarding security situation. This is important, especially in terms of how the civil and military leadership has talked about tightening the noose around anybody who is involved in smuggling, hoarding or any other illegal activity that is affecting the security situation in the country, and has also discussed the fact that this is not going to be subject to anybody who is in a particular position of power or holding a particular office. This is going to be something that will be one size fits all, and it's going to be a priority in terms of actions being taken without any bias towards anyone who's influential or in a powerful position. This is important, especially in terms of the way that this now will impact the future strategy and actions taken according to the national security plan. There is also concern that is being discussed regarding the Afghan transit trade illegally across the border, which is also something that came under discussion in the meeting and is part of securing the border region towards a more peaceful security environment within the country. This meeting, of course, was important in terms of involving all the provincial stakeholders as well, chaired by the caretaker Prime Minister, and which later on the Chief of Army Staff also spoke about how this is something that is going to be a collective effort moving forward towards ensuring peace in the country. And so we're going to be talking about that in further detail and what it means in terms of actual actions and what is going to be a shift in strategy, if any. Of course, Farokh and Faisal are going to be with me for the discussion on these two topics. For our first segment regarding the freedom of expression in India, we have been joined by Dr. John Dayal, who's an Indian human rights activist, and Dr. Jameel Khan, who's a former ambassador. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of the discussion. And let me start with you, Dr. John. The discussion, of course, around freedom of press or freedom of media in India is something that we have discussed in detail beforehand as well. And incidents such as what has happened with NewsClick is also important in pointing towards what is really going on in the country. But I want to understand your perspective also in terms of this particular incident, whether or not, given the fact there was another publication sometime before by an international media outlet against this particular media agency, also claiming that there is foreign propaganda that is being conducted and there is foreign funding that is happening. And I want to understand then, in the context of that, what do you think really is happening on ground with the way that journalists' homes are being raided?
Incidents such as what has happened with NewsClick is also important in pointing towards what is really going on in the country. But I want to understand your perspective also in terms of this particular incident, whether or not, given the fact there was another publication.
Right. Dr. John, I'd request you to also please mute if there's any TV or laptop on, because I can hear myself and perhaps that's what's going on.
context of that, what do you think really is happening on ground?
All right, Dr. John, I think I'll come back to you. I think you're unable to hear me at the moment. Ambassador Saab, let me come to you with the perspective in terms of how we're looking at India in terms of what has been going on for quite some time. Of course, the issues with the way that the world is ranking India in terms of freedom of press, with the way that these incidents are taking place, and how we've seen previously also that any sort of dissenting voice, any sort of media agency or journalist that talks against the policies of the current BJP-led government is often subject to such treatment. And so it brings to question whether or not there is any freedom of expression or freedom of media in the country. But then I also want to know, if that is the case, then how is it that India still gets to survive in a place where it calls itself secular, democratic, and a champion of such rights of freedom of expression and others, while at the same time taking such actions on the ground without anybody batting an eyelid? Dr. Jameel, can you hear me?
Right, I can hear you now quite well. Well, India, they are taking its advantage of its geopolitical alignment and positioning, and that's why, with such a serious violation of the freedom of expression, not only freedom of expression but also freedom of movement, minorities, you name any, and they are trying to violate um, uh, so many international laws. For example, even Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 18, there's a violation India is making and just scot-free. Um, Article 19, again, freedom of opinion. There are so many other covenants of the world, the International Covenant for the Economic, Social, and Cultural Right, that also speaks about the freedom of the speech and freedom of expression. International Covenant of the Civil and Political Right, Article 19, that also very clearly dilates upon that. So India is not concerned, under Modi regime, any international law, whether it's a resolution of the Security Council in terms of Kashmir, or whether it's a religious freedom report of the United States, or whether it's the Human Rights Commission report, which they published more than 100 pages each twice, and they have indicated all the violations in that. No one less than the Human Rights Commissioner, with a tear rolling down his cheeks, he had mentioned about the kind of serious violation which has been taking place, not only in mainly of the human rights, and in that he also expressed about the freedom of press. In addition, the Secretary General report was published, and that was also published just about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. They have also mentioned and covered not only Kashmir, but also the press freedom and the freedom of speech, freedom of expression. So all these examples, what I have quoted to you, is basically the testimony or the demonstration that the international laws are being violated in the Modi administration. And that's why those which are independent agencies and organizations, they have already downgraded India from 140 to 150 during Modi regime in their ranking of Press Freedom Index. So, if we, and then more importantly, there are about 67 journalists, they've been killed during the Modi regime, and only as compared to 2021, the killing of the journalists have risen to almost 50% higher, um, more than 200 serious attempts on the journalists have already taken place. So all these are on record. It's not that we are just speaking something which is not really found on the record of the world or in the literature or the press. But still, it's a fundamental question how India is really getting away from it. Basically, quite, as I said, it's a line both economic alignment, more important, strategic alignment uh, with the Quads or with the United States, with the allies of the United States, and because of the containment of China policy of the United States, uh, they are just ignoring all violations of international law. So I don't think the freedom of expression or freedom of press in the Modi regime is going to improve um, even by an iota. So this seems to be going on, and this seems to go on unabated. And the world probably is not. If there was some other country, by now the international laws they could have been invoked, and even the resolution in Security Council would have been passed. But it is not happening. And India by itself, the scholars of India, the human rights activists of India, the intellect class of India, and a sizable percentage of India who are always of the secular India, they're worried of this situation uh, under the regime of the Modi government. And the way out, unless uh, uh, something important happens, and the very posture which Modi taking place for winning the next election, based on radicalization, based on marginalization of the minorities, and based on the violation by gagging the press, by criticizing and deleting the BBC documentary, and imposing restriction on BBC documentary, and they don't stop there. Twitter, YouTube, all video clips, they
Yes.
they they're deleting it. They're trying to just hide it
Right.
from the eyes of those people who are uh, really for the democracy and the real democracy and the secularism. Yes.
Right. Dr. John, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear
Right.
me?
Yes, I can hear you. Welcome to the show, Dr. John. We are, of course, talking about, as you heard, Ambassador Saab also speak on the issue of freedom of press in India, and this is in relation to what has happened recently also with NewsClick. And I want your general opinion as a response to what Ambassador Saab also said, but add to that what you think is this current issue with NewsClick in terms of what has happened previously also by an international publication citing the fact that there is international funding and that there is Chinese propaganda going on. So I want to know what you think is happening, particularly with NewsClick, and then in general in terms of the actions taken, such as the raids of journalists' homes, which seems to be unfortunately becoming a norm.
I think His Excellency, Mr. Jamil Khan, has done a wide sweep of the Indian situation. And I cannot really challenge him on facts, because that is how international groups like USERF and the United Nations have reported the situation. And it is not a very good time to be a human rights activist or to be a journalist in all of South Asia. But India seems to be hell-bent, if I may say so, in trying to slide as much as they can down the numbers and the ladders. And today we are, as journalists, we're all shaken. In the morning, some reports say that maybe 95 or so raids were conducted across the country, and a couple of dozen people were taken for the interrogation. By evening, 6 of them have been released, 2 have been formally arrested, and all of them, in fact, are personal friends of mine, some for 20 years, some for 40 years. 2 persons arrested, Prabir Purkasta and his human resource manager, are people you would be last to expect for the charges that they have been put under, which is the Unlawful Activities Act, a terrible act which allows the police to keep you as long as they wish in custody. And the act under which another friend of mine, Father Stan Swami, died, a prisoner of the state. So we are a worried lot. A few hours ago, we had a meeting at the Press Club of India in New Delhi where the entire journalist community came together and decided that we're going to protest it, we're going to demonstrate every day and go to the Supreme Court and do whatever is possible under law to point out that while we all affirm our faith in the rule of law, and if any of us, including me, has broken an Indian law, we deserve to be in jail. But if we have not broken Indian law, if we are being strangulated for speaking, if we are being incarcerated for challenging the state, the government, the Prime Minister are not India. India is a country, it's a state, it's a people, it's a thought, it's an idea. And governments come and governments go. People in government come and go. So criticizing them, criticizing the Prime Minister, criticizing, we are not a dictatorship, we are a democracy. And if you're going to be arrested, and please look at the context. All of the media that was, now 2/3 of it is controlled by two people, just two people, Mr. Adani and Mr. Ambani. The other 1/3 that remains, you can say half of it is part of the what in India is called the Godi media, the lapdog media. So it's a very narrow group of journalists, YouTubers, and independent writers and people like me who are able to and are trying with great difficulty to find premises to which we can speak of the truth to authority and convey the truth to the people. And this is the group now under attack. So you've got all of the media now in government control, and the small section available to be called independent is now being arrested, interrogated, and put under this terrible label and pressure. And as the ambassador said earlier, when you're muzzling the press, also not allowing it to speak of other transgressions, other suppression of other human rights. I'm a Christian by faith, but an Indian by my citizenship. And I would like to think that no minority community is safe in India unless all minority communities are safe. How can Christians be safe if Muslims are not safe, if Sikhs are not safe? So that issue, only an independent media can tell the world, can tell us, and assure the people that the struggle is on. And that is now being, our lips are being sealed, our mouth is being taped. I think we should and we will challenge this.
Right. Faisal, when we take a look at the situation of what Dr. John seems to be talking about, it seems that the space is increasingly becoming very limited for anybody to be able to speak up against what is going on. And it's very brave for people like Dr. John to be able to talk about these issues, and many others also who are of course doing this at a cost, and their entire profession seems to be something that is an act of rebellion, and that comes with such a huge price. But I want to know then that in terms of what the people and the journalists seem to be doing, which is of course credible and appreciated, at the same time, what is then the responsibility in terms of making sure that they don't actually have to pay that price, that there is actually much more than just a lowering of the ranking in a world index that is being carried out in terms of making India accountable, or as a consequence of what is happening. Because so far, of course, whatever is going on within India seems to be something that that is being suffered largely by the people in India or the journalists in India. And the rest of the world, of course, is able to condemn it, maybe, or talk about it. But there isn't much that is happening in actually helping the people on ground. Do you think that if not states, if not governments, if not organizations per se, can the individual journalist community, for example, or people at large talking about these issues can actually help them?
Yes, it will create a sort of impact on India and on the international stage if the international organizations related to journalism, they keep on speaking about the of course sort of torture which is being applied on different journalists and news outlets of India, just to suppress them by the government. I think it will create a sort of impact, but here is the point. Point is that today's India, of course, it is being favored by the Western countries for certain reasons. For certain reasons to be, as they want to, of course, have business with India, because they see India as a huge market. And at the same time, of course, they want to contain China, and to contain China, of course, they have to have India in the region, posing towards by China. But Sana, earlier a word was mentioned by Dr. John Dayal, that was an appropriate word, and that was Godi. There is, of course, it's quite similar word to Modi in India.
Godi means lap.
Yeah. In India, this word is always being used for the media, Godi media, and it represents that Modi has, of course, kept all of the media in his own lap, meaning that the government is, of course, controlling over all of the medias, and the medias they can't control, they keep on blaming them. We know that very recently there was another journalist, Irfan Mehraj, who was picked up from Kashmir, Indian illegally occupied Kashmir. The only they could book him under was that he was terror financing, and he was receiving the terror funds, and these were the allegations against him. Today we have of course another News Click. It is very renowned news portal based in India, and of course working from within India, and it is known for being very non-biased. And at the same time, very recently, it has been highlighted for its work related to Manipur, and whatever the barbarism was taking place in Manipur, they've been highlighting it day and night, and they were being credited for their exclusive work from Manipur, because the only news portal which we could see working on the ground was, of course, this. And the only thing they have come up against them is, of course, related to China, because in today's India we know that their intelligence agency keeps on looking towards China when it comes to whatever is happening in northeast. They believe that China might be busy in there, and China is behind whatever is being going wrong in northeast, whereas they need to understand that it is their internal policies which are actually creating the fuss in northeast, and that is what NewsClick has been highlighting in recent past. And once more, of course, the charges which are brought against NewsClick, they are related to China, that they are receiving funding from China. So even if when the police officers, they were demanded to of course give the explanation about it on the media, they did not do it. They simply picked up somebody and they said these are the charges and that's it, we are dealing with them like this. We remember, Sana, that there was another case, EU Disinfo Lab, and behind EU Disinfo Lab we came to know that there were more than 700 news portals which were working under same umbrella called Srivastava Group. Srivastava Group was based in New Delhi, and it was, of course, the godfather of all of these news portals.
Fake
news portals, and of course they were propagating against on several lines against the Muslims within India, against Christians within India, against the Khalistan movement, and they have been doing it since a long time. And of course they were doing it against Pakistan as well. Then comes the truth. Of course, NewsClick is not part of it. So in India, a new precedent is being set that if you want to have a news portal, you have to be part of Srivastava Group. If you are not registered with the Srivastava Group, you are not allowed to be in India, and you're not allowed to run, of course, your journalism in India, and that is what is happening. It is very sad to see that the journalists are obviously colleagues from across the border. They are suffering in today's India, and it is horrible to see that the intelligentsia, the people of the pen, the journalists who really working hard to make India better, as any journalist would do in his own country, they are doing their best, but their government does not want them to be the best and do best, and they just want any journalist, if he wants to work, they have to work under the guidelines of Srivastava Group.
Right, I understand that. But Farokh, when we talk about these issues and these problems, I want to know whether or not this can be gotten away with India claiming that this is an India problem, that this is part of whatever their policies are, whatever they want to do and how they want to behave with whatever actions that they want to take. And I understand, of course, that there are other issues which are definitely not just an India problem, but are still claimed, such as, of course, even despite UN Security Council resolutions, there is still, of course, a lot of talk coming in from India regarding the very obvious issue with regards to the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and that sort of also is something that at least they are able to just say and claim, and so far we haven't really seen a solution. So when we talk about such issues which seem to be concerning the community within India and their own policies, how far will then there be space for international players to be able to come in and say that this is not okay and that you need to do something about it?
Right, Sana, thank you very much. This is a brilliant question, and you have taken the thought out of my mind and actually posed this question. Thank you very much. I'm also very glad that Faisal has actually brought up Srivastava Group because you know, that is one hell of an influence campaign that was unearthed by EU Disinfo Lab. Earlier you asked questions regarding Dr. John Dayal and other conscientious people who are actually working there. I think that when it comes to Dr. John Dayal, I want to find a high resolution picture of his and make it a poster on the wall of my study. So people like this are example for all of us, and I hope one day we can actually match that level of courage. When it comes to freedom of expression, Faisal ended up calling NewsClick you know, an unbiased organization. With due respect, freedom of press includes a biased organization that is biased against the government, right? So even if it wasn't biased, even if it was biased and it was critical of Modi or Modi's government, that should have been allowed as well, but that is not happening. Right now, what we are talking about is a lost battle, most of it. India's media has been restructured. It has been owned now by a few business groups, and which are essentially friendly to Narendra Modi. Dr. John Dayal actually mentioned Ambani and Adani. Both of them actually come from Gujarat, home state of Narendra Modi. So it is a given that now media is going to behave in a certain way. NewsClick and a few others which have been raided in the past, including, by the way, BBC in the past, if you remember, we did segments on that as well. That actually tells you of something that has been going on in India, that India cannot tolerate even a sliver of free independence of thought or independence of expression. Having said that, now let me come to the question that you have asked. Anybody who says that because the West wants to woo India, and because of that, and it wants India as a counterweight to China, it is a slam dunk that now India is going to be tolerated. This was essentially a question whether there will be consequences or not. My humble submission is that India problem is now world's problem. India has been sparring with Pakistan, it has been bullying its neighbors, we know what has been going on. India has picked a fight with China as well. The people thought that, okay, it is the new so-called new Cold War, then they have to tolerate that as well. But now, after picking a fight with Canada, they have picked a fight with somebody else, that is UK. There was a Gurdwara episode where an Indian diplomat tried to enter a Gurdwara and he was stopped. Amazingly, Indian media immediately dubs anybody who is actually opposing Modi government or its officials as Khalistani, right? But there's something else that has happened, and it is actually drawing attention of the West as well. I've been interested in the growth of far-right, white nationalist movements in UK, in Europe, and in America, especially since the days of Donald Trump coming to power. And that was when I started following Alex Jones as well. Something very interesting happened a few days ago, Sana. If you remember, on 18th of September, Justin Trudeau has stood in the parliament and had accused India of assassinating a Sikh leader, a Sikh Canadian. Amazingly, after that, what India has been doing is dubbing all the Indian, Sikh diaspora as Khalistani. But what is that relationship between Alex Jones and Sikhs or India? That is amazing, because Alex Jones in the past has come under a lot of scrutiny. He is compensating for $1 billion worth of penalty that was given to him by a court regarding one of the shootings that he said was staged. But something interesting happened this time. He has come up on 29th in his InfoWars program. He has come up with a new conspiracy theory that Western authorities are inducting illegal immigrants, and that, by the way, somehow in the whole story, that they are going to be used against white population. And he mentions Sikhs also. That is happening when at a time when in America a video went viral that illegal immigrants are entering from the southern border, and they're Indians, and they're chanting Jai Shri Ram. Now, Jai Shri Ram is a slogan of Hindutva supporters, but even at that time, the man who cannot tell apart Sikhs and Hindus is actually building up sentiment against Sikhs. So what does it tell you? It tells you, because he has following in Canada, all these elements are being used. India is using all these elements to actually provoke. Shrivastava Group is one influence campaign. There must be others. White nationalists must be one part of it. So the West is now paying attention. On the January 6th, there was only one foreign flag when US Capitol was being assailed, Sana.
Right.
Which one was it? Indians, And the people who were actually staging that attack were Modi Bhakts. So with that kind of a situation, now the world realizes that this India campaign is going to actually upstage and destabilize their countries as well.
Right.
That's why FBI is also, to my knowledge, and Mounties in Canada and in UK, MI6 and MI5 also, are investigating these links between Hindu extremist groups and far-right extremists in the West.
All right. Dr. Jamil, then in this context, when we see how perhaps so many other countries, other organizations and individuals are now perhaps understanding in terms of the number of incidents that have been pointed out, what the role and the way that the deterioration in India is now impacting relations and aspects for different countries. Do you think that perhaps this is something that can be preemptively acted upon? Because it seems that only after certain incidents have already taken place is such kind of a reaction coming forward. Are we still waiting for perhaps a situation to get even worse before there is any sort of stop to what is going on in India?
Well, India has been quite used to violating all the international law and the human rights within and outside India with its neighbors, may it be Sikkim, Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, ourselves, Pakistan. But first time, they have taken some initiative. The Indian government, Modi government, has taken some initiative by killing people outside. That's the transnational killing. And that has been taken very seriously by the Western world, such as like Canada, UK, US, France, Australia. And they've already shown their concern, and they're asking India to seriously cooperate in the investigation of Canada. And Canada, Five Eyes have already given its full account to the Canadian government. They're monitoring it also. So this time it seems that Indian authorities, particularly those who were involved and those who carry out such operations elsewhere, transnational assassinations, they are quite worried, and it's quite worrisome for them. Although, as I mentioned earlier, India, because of a geo-economic advantage and geopolitical advantage, is still trying to exploit And more importantly, now the Modi government is Modi party is now in the election campaign. So probably it will be they would probably like to take this pressure by the Western countries. To what extent they can do it, I think the time would come. But the Western countries, Canada and its those who are supporting Canada and particularly in this, because this is a very serious violation of United Nations Charter, in which the sovereignty, as the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, has mentioned it in its parliament, that it's a matter of sovereignty of Canada, and that has equally been taken serious by UK and Germany, France, and Australia. So, what I'm envisaging that this time, if the resolution is tabled in the Security Council, it will be very hard for the United States to straightway veto it. They can do lobbying, probably United States and its allies, but because of the pressure from their own country, from the own human rights activists, from their own organizations, from their own think tanks, from their own NGOs, these respective countries, including United States and other countries and its allies, despite the fact that they have their interest in India, they would probably find it very hard to veto any if that
Right.
stage reaches. If India does not cooperate, because these violations warrant invoking some international law. So if that happens, then the resolution at the last stage resolution could be tabled on the Security Council, and that could
Right.
become very complicated for India.
All right, Dr. John, in terms of what we're discussing of the kind of response that perhaps the international players can make in terms of helping the situation, what would you hope for as a journalist, as a voice who is talking about these issues within India, that foreign entities can do in order to help your situation at the moment?
I think my colleagues in this debate have dwelt at large on almost every international aspect of and the ramifications of India's media issue. But I would have wished that the debate had focused on what today's arrest means to democracy in India. For us who are struggling to enlarge the footprint of a vibrant, breathing democracy, the necessity of a free media, unencumbered by any fear of official, monetary, fiscal, any other pressure group from intervening. And I think it's important, even for Pakistan, to know that unless there's a free media, we cannot speak to power, we cannot explore and analyze subcontinental situations in a manner that are truthful, which government of India could then act upon, develop relationships, increase friendship, reduce tensions in South Asia and indeed in the world. So when I am talking of freedom of the press, there is tremendous role today in trying to safeguard democracy, safeguard structures that are required, the pillars, the Supreme Court, the Election Commission, the Information Commission, the National Human Rights Commission, the Minorities Commission, so many other issues, so many pillars of state whose health is critical to democracy in India and therefore critical to peace in South Asia. And that is what we want to focus today as we try to struggle to see that government does not sort of close our mouths by it has tried blandishment that doesn't work. It has tried bribes that don't work. It has tried snide attempts at curbing of freedom that doesn't work. And this direct action to arrest Prabir Purkasta is not only to stop those click. Prabir has been a voice of reason, of scientific temper the last 20 years in a world which is going into mythology, which is going into all sorts of crazy areas. And these are the people who remain to speak. We are, in a way, I would not call it an endangered species, but certainly a species under great ecological pressure. The ecology of crony capitalism, the ecology of the tyranny of one man on his own government. The cabinet system is all but defunct in a manner. So here is a situation when the press needs to be protected, pampered, upheld by the people of India and the people of the world. For
Right,
everybody's sake, not just for John Dayal.
Right, absolutely, Dr. John, and that's an extremely valid aspect that, of course, needs more discussion as well. And we're going to be talking about that in future shows. But thank you so much for shedding light on what really needs to happen within India as well. And thank you for being with us in the debate. And thank you, Ambassador Jameel Saab, for being part of the discussion as well. In our next segment, we're going to be taking a look at the Apex Committee meeting on the peaceful security situation that is, of course, the desire and demand of what is happening in the country at the moment. It seems that all the stakeholders, both civil and military, are at the same page. But Faisal, I want to understand then, in terms of what is going on, there is a talk of tightening the noose. Just how far do you think there is potential for that to actually happen? What is possibly going to be the direction forward that is already not taking place?
Sana, if we closely look into the matters, of course, we know that this should have been done long ago. Why I say this, that both of the things which were the highlights of today, they are related to Afghans getting Pakistani passports, and then Afghans, of course, using Pakistan's SIM card, Pakistan-based cellular companies. They have been using them. The numbers they've been using, and them numbers, they were constantly being used in the terrorism, in the kidnappings, in all of these crimes. And then there are certain numbers which are being used in the money being transferred, the dollar being transferred from Pakistan to Afghanistan as well. So these aspects, they have been highlighted in the past as well, and now there are serious steps which are being taken against this. And to me, I think fighting the terrorism, all of these minute, detailed aspects, they need to be looked into, and now they are going to be looked into. And to me, I think it's a very positive, it would carry a very positive effect in the coming days. And war on terror, of course, it will be at the full swing. And the Afghan element, which is involved in shape of civilians facilitating terrorism, it would be countered from here.
All right, Farooq, another important aspect that was decided was the involvement of any public office or government office holders with reference to any illegal activity, especially in smuggling and hoarding. And I want to then understand that unfortunately in the past, also in different aspects, we have seen that this seems to be a hindrance, especially in terms of the kind of setup that there is, and how, of course, powerful entities are able to navigate through the legalities. And I want to understand how exactly will these decisions impact the possibility of anyone also being involved and limit their ability to do so.
Right, Sana. Let me first actually appreciate and praise the Apex Committee and its meeting, because I think that with people like me who have been following the war on terror for 20 years, when incidents like Mastoon take place, your faith in our ability to fight back kind of is shaken at times. But thanks to the Apex Committee, the presence of Army Chief there, and all the office bearers, including the chair, that was the Prime Minister, I think that the directions where they have actually chosen to go is like putting their finger at the nub of gist of the problem. One of the reasons why Pakistan-Afghanistan border has been soft is because of smuggling. And smuggling has been going on there for quite some time, and there must be some people who were within the system who were supporting it. Had that not been the case, why would you have this kind of, you have actually solidified your border, you have tried to actually fence it, and despite that, this keeps on happening. So it is important to act against those elements as well, and especially if there is any holdover or anybody who is part of the system, they should be punished. But having said that, let me go back to the illegal immigrant issue, and also the bits that Faisal was drawing attention to, especially the SIM card, the CNIC, and other papers, right? That is important as well, because and I'm grateful that now we have a new Nadra chief, and because of that, we are going to take care of the documentation issue as well. Nadra's machine has been declining. I recently went for a renewal of my CNIC, and they take your thumbprints and all.
Okay.
In a month, I had to actually go for a re-verification of my SIM. When I go there, it is not recognizing my thumb. And I have to actually sit there for 15 minutes, alternating within fingers. Then finally I get my SIM, right?
Okay.
So you have to actually start working on everything. Illegal immigrants, remember, Afghanistan is a very, very sad case. And I understand that people there have gone through tragedy. And that's why we are hosting so many refugees. But the problem is when you have so many negative activities happening in the country, and they can be linked to any foreign body, then it becomes impossible to actually keep on moving forward. I understand that there might be some legitimate cases who are going to suffer as well. But the fact is that if you have to get rid of illegal immigrants, it is the time, and time is now. If you don't do it, the country is going to keep on suffering. It is, remember, 7 years ago, 9 years ago, Ajit Doval actually made a speech in which he claimed that he remained in Pakistan undercover for 7 years, right? With that kind of a thing, that means that there are people who give them artificial or fake passport and documents as well. So that kind of things have to be taken care of.
Exactly.
Absolutely, and it seems that the decisions taken by the Apex Committee are in the right direction. Thank you, Farokh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us in the debate. That's all that we have from the show. We'll now see you tomorrow.